I was 23 years old when my grandmother looked me in the eye and told me I was no longer her granddaughter. Not because I'd done something terrible. Not because I'd hurt anyone or broken the law or brought shame to the family name. But because I chose to marry the man I loved. His name was Marcus Chen, and he was everything my grandmother Catherine Whitmore despised wrapped into one person. He was Chinese American, the son of immigrants who ran a small restaurant in Oakland, California. He had student loans. He drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. His parents spoke with accents. And in my grandmother's world, that made him completely unacceptable. I should probably back up and explain who Catherine Whitmore was, because that context matters more than you might think. My grandmother wasn't just wealthy. She was generationally, obscenely, suffocatingly wealthy. Her father had made a fortune in shipping in the 1940s, and her late husband, my grandfather Thomas, had multiplied that fortune through strategic real estate investments across Northern California. By the time I was born in 1998, the Whitmore family was worth somewhere north of $40 million. Catherine lived in a sprawling estate in Hillsborough, one of the wealthiest zip codes in America. The house had 12 bedrooms, a tennis court, a pool house bigger than most people's actual houses, and gardens that required a full-time staff of 3 to maintain. I grew up in that house. Not because my parents were wealthy, but because they were dead. My mother, Catherine's only daughter Elizabeth, died when I was 4 years old. Brain aneurysm. One moment she was laughing at something on TV, the next moment she was gone. My father, David Morrison, couldn't handle the grief. He started drinking heavily, lost his job as a financial analyst, and wrapped his car around a tree on Highway 101 when I was 6. So Catherine became my guardian. She raised me in that mansion, in that rarefied world of country clubs and private schools and charity galas where the cheapest plate cost $500. She sent me to Harker School in San Jose, where tuition was over $50,000 a year. She made sure I took writing lessons and piano lessons and French lessons. She was grooming me to be a proper Whitmore heir. But she was also cold. Impossibly cold. She never hugged me. Never told me she loved me. She corrected my posture at dinner and critiqued my performance at school and reminded me constantly that I was representing the family name. I spent my childhood desperate for her approval, trying to be perfect enough to earn some small sign of affection. I never got it. The only warmth in that house came from Rosa, the housekeeper who had worked for my grandmother for 30 years. Rosa was from Guatemala, and she was more of a mother to me than anyone else. She taught me to make tamales. She let me cry on her shoulder when the pressure got too heavy. She told me stories about her own children, who she sent money to every month. Catherine treated Rosa like furniture. I went to Stanford for college, because that's where Whitmores went. I majored in economics, because that's what Catherine told me to study. I joined the right clubs, dated the right boys from the right families, and maintained a perfect 3.9 GPA. And I was miserable. Then, in my junior year, I met Marcus in a coffee shop near campus. He was a grad student in computer science, working on his master's degree while working part-time at his parents' restaurant to help cover expenses. He spilled coffee on my laptop by accident, apologized profusely, and insisted on buying me a new drink. We talked for 3 hours that day. He was smart and funny and kind in a way I'd never experienced before. He asked me questions about what I actually wanted, not what I was supposed to want. He told me about growing up helping in his parents' restaurant, about learning to code by watching YouTube videos because his family couldn't afford expensive tutoring. He came from a completely different world than mine. And I fell in love with him almost immediately. We dated for 2 years. I kept it hidden from Catherine at first, knowing instinctively that she wouldn't approve. But by my senior year, I knew I wanted to marry him. I knew I wanted to build a life with him, something real and warm and human, nothing like the cold marble existence in Hillsborough. So I told her. I drove to the estate on a Saturday afternoon in March 2021, rehearsing my speech the entire way. I found Catherine in her sitting room, the one overlooking the gardens, having tea like she did every afternoon at 3 o'clock. "Grandmother," I said, "I need to tell you something important. I've been seeing someone for 2 years now. His name is Marcus Chen, and I love him. We're planning to get engaged." Catherine set down her teacup with exaggerated care. "Chen," she repeated, her voice flat. "That's a Chinese name. His parents are from China originally, yes. But Marcus was born here in Oakland." "I see." She picked up a small silver spoon and stirred her tea, even though she'd already stirred it. And what does his family do? They own a restaurant in Oakland. It's a really successful. A restaurant? Catherine's lips pressed into a thin line. How quaint. Grandmother, he's wonderful. He's brilliant and kind, and he makes me happy. I really want you to meet him. No. Just like that. One word, delivered with absolute finality. What do you mean, no? Catherine finally looked at me directly, and her eyes were like chips of ice. I mean no, Isabel. You will not marry this person. You will end this relationship immediately. You will find someone appropriate, someone from a respectable family, someone who understands what it means to be a Whitmore. My heart was pounding. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm 21 years old. I just wanted you to know because I hoped you'd be happy for me. Happy? Catherine laughed, a brittle sound with no humor in it. You want me to be happy that you're throwing away everything I've given you? The education, the opportunities, the standing in society? To marry some immigrant's son who works in a restaurant? His parents are immigrants, yes. And there's nothing wrong with that. They came here with nothing and built a successful business. Marcus is getting his master's degree from Stanford. I don't care if he has a dozen degrees. He is not suitable for a Whitmore. And if you insist on pursuing this relationship, then you are no longer a Whitmore either. The words hit me like a physical blow. You don't mean that. I absolutely mean it. Catherine stood up, smoothing her skirt. I have raised you. I have provided for you. I have given you every advantage. And in return, I expect you to honor this family's legacy. If you choose to marry this person, you will do so without my support, financial or otherwise. You will no longer be welcome in this house. And you will be removed from my will entirely. I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of her. So that's it? I said. Either I marry who you choose, or you disown me? Those are your options, yes. Choose wisely, Isabel. I stood there for a long moment, looking at this woman who had raised me but never loved me. This woman who saw me as an asset to be managed, not a person with my own heart and dreams. Then I guess I'm not a Whitmore anymore, I said quietly. I turned and walked out of that house. I never went back. Marcus and I got married 6 months later, in September 2021, in a small ceremony at his parents' restaurant. His mother, Li Wei, cried happy tears and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. His father, James, gave a toast in Mandarin that Marcus had to translate for me, about family and love and choosing your own path. Rosa came to the wedding. She had to take a bus from Hillsborough, and she brought me a gift wrapped in newspaper, a set of hand-embroidered pillowcases she'd made herself. Catherine didn't come, obviously. She didn't send a gift. She didn't even acknowledge the wedding had happened. And I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I'd chosen love over money, that I'd made the right decision, that I was finally free. But it hurt. God, it hurt. We moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment in San Jose, splitting rent at $2,400 a month. Marcus got a job at a tech startup after finishing his master's. I got a position at a small financial consulting firm. We were making it work, barely, living paycheck to paycheck in one of the most expensive regions in America. My grandmother's money would have made life so much easier. But I'd made my choice. The years passed. Marcus's startup did well, and he got promoted to senior engineer. My firm liked my work, and I climbed the ladder to senior analyst. We moved to a slightly bigger apartment in Sunnyvale. We adopted a cat named Dumpling. We were building a life together, piece by piece. I heard occasional news about Catherine through Rosa, who still worked at the estate. She was still hosting her charity events, still sitting on boards of various organizations, still ruling her little empire from that mansion in Hillsborough. She never asked about me. Then, in June 2024, everything changed. I was at work when I got a call from an unknown number. Usually I don't answer those, but something made me pick up. Is this Isabel Morrison? A woman's voice asked. Yes, this is she. My name is Jennifer Hu Wang. I'm an attorney with Sullivan and Cromwell in San Francisco. I'm calling regarding Catherine Whitmore. I understand she's your grandmother? My stomach dropped. Yes. Is she? Is something wrong? Mrs. Whitmore suffered a stroke 3 days ago. She's currently at Stanford Hospital. She's stable, but the prognosis is not good. I'm calling because Mrs. Whitmore has asked to see you. I was so shocked I nearly dropped my phone. She asked for me? Yes. She's been quite insistent. She's asked me to convey that it's urgent. I sat there in stunned silence. After 3 years of complete silence, of acting like I didn't exist, Catherine suddenly wanted to see me? I need to think about this, I said. I understand this is unexpected, Jennifer said carefully. But I should mention that time may be a factor. The doctors aren't certain how long Mrs. Whitmore has. She's 86 years old, and the stroke was significant. I closed my eyes. What room is she in? I didn't tell Marcus right away. I drove to Stanford Hospital after work, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Part of me was angry that Catherine thought she could just summon me after 3 years of treating me like I was dead to her. Part of me was terrified of seeing her again, of falling back into that desperate need for her approval. And part of me, despite everything, was still that little girl who just wanted her grandmother to love her. I found her room on the 4th floor. Through the window in the door, I could see her lying in the hospital bed, looking impossibly small and fragile. Catherine had always seemed larger than life to me, this imposing figure who controlled everything around her. Now she just looked old and sick. I pushed open the door. Her eyes opened immediately. They were still sharp, still calculating, despite everything. "Isabel," she said. Her voice was weak, slightly slurred on one side from the stroke. "You came. Your lawyer said it was urgent." "Always so cold," she said. "You get that from me, I suppose." I didn't move from the doorway. "Why did you ask me to come here?" Catherine shifted slightly in the bed, wincing with the effort. "Because I'm dying. I don't have much time left. Weeks, maybe months if I'm unlucky. And I needed to see you before I go." "Why?" "You made it very clear 3 years ago that I wasn't your granddaughter anymore." "I did say that, didn't I?" She paused, seeming to gather her strength. "I've had a lot of time to think these past few days. About my life. About the choices I made. About you." I waited, saying nothing. "I was wrong," Catherine said quietly. I almost laughed. In my entire life, I had never heard Catherine Whitmore admit she was wrong about anything. "I was wrong to give you that ultimatum," she continued. "I was wrong to disown you. I was wrong to let pride and prejudice dictate my actions. You were right to choose love. You were braver than I ever was." Tears were suddenly blurring my vision. I'd waited my whole life to hear something like this from her. "I've changed my will," Catherine said. "You're the sole beneficiary. Everything. The house, the investments, the money. All of it goes to you. Jennifer has the updated documents. But I needed to tell you myself. I needed you to know that I was wrong, and that I'm sorry, and that I love you." The tears were falling now, and I couldn't stop them. "I've never stopped loving you, Isabel," Catherine said. "I was just too stubborn and foolish to show it. Can you forgive me?" I walked to her bedside and took her hand. It felt papery and thin, so different from the strong, cold hands I remembered from childhood. "Yes," I whispered. "I forgive you." She squeezed my hand weakly. "Thank you. That's more than I deserve." We talked for another hour. She asked about Marcus, about my job, about my life. Really asked, with genuine interest, for the first time ever. She told me she was proud of me. She told me she'd been following my career through Rosa, who she'd finally confessed to asking for updates about me. When I left the hospital that night, I felt like something fundamental had shifted in my universe. Catherine Whitmore had apologized to me. Had told me she loved me. Had made me her heir. I called Marcus from the parking lot and told him everything, crying so hard I could barely speak. "Come home," he said gently. "We'll figure this out together." Catherine died 6 weeks later, on July 28, 2024. I was with her at the end. So was Rosa, who Catherine had finally thanked for years of service and loyalty. In her last moments, Catherine was more human than I'd ever seen her. The funeral was held at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church in San Mateo, a massive affair with hundreds of attendees. It seemed like every wealthy family in the Bay Area was there, along with representatives from dozens of charities and organizations Catherine had supported. I gave the eulogy. I talked about her strength and her dedication, about how she'd raised me after my parents died, about how she'd taught me to be resilient and independent. I even managed to talk about our reconciliation at the end, about her courage in admitting she'd been wrong. I didn't mention the 3 years she'd disowned me. It didn't seem important anymore. After the funeral, Jennifer Huang asked me to come to her office for the reading of the will. Marcus came with me. We sat in a sleek conference room on the 45th floor of a building in San Francisco's financial district, looking out over the city. Jennifer opened a folder and pulled out several documents. Before we begin, she said, I want to confirm that you were present when Mrs. Whitmore suffered her stroke and asked to see you, correct? Yes, I said. I visited her in the hospital the day after you called me. And she told you that she'd changed her will to make you the sole beneficiary? Yes. She said she was leaving me everything. Jennifer nodded slowly. Then she slid a document across the table to me. This is Catherine Whitmore's last will and testament, she said. It was updated and properly executed on June 15, 2024, 3 days before her stroke. I picked up the document and started reading. And my blood ran cold. The will stated that Catherine's entire estate, valued at approximately $42 million, was to be divided as follows. $40 million to the Whitmore Foundation, a charitable trust to be established for the benefit of various causes Catherine had supported during her lifetime. $1.5 million to Rosa Martinez, in recognition of her 30 years of loyal service. $500,000 to Jennifer Huang, for her legal services and friendship. And to Isabel Morrison, née Whitmore, nothing. Not a single dollar. There was an additional clause that made my stomach turn. I specifically exclude my granddaughter Isabel Morrison from any inheritance, as she has demonstrated through her choices that she values neither family legacy nor family duty. She chose to marry beneath her station despite my explicit wishes, showing a lack of judgment and respect that makes her unfit to manage the Whitmore estate. This exclusion is intentional and final. I looked up at Jennifer, my hands shaking. I don't understand, I said. She told me she'd changed the will. She told me I was the sole beneficiary. She apologized. She said she loved me. Jennifer's expression was carefully neutral. Mrs. Whitmore did indeed tell you those things. I was present for part of that conversation. Then why would she lie to me? I don't believe it was a lie, exactly, Jennifer said. I believe it was what she wanted to happen. But the reality is that this will, dated June 15, was the last legally valid will Mrs. Whitmore executed. Any oral promises or statements made after that date are not legally binding. Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. Are you saying she intended to change the will but died before she could? I'm saying that this is the will we have, Jennifer said carefully. This is the legally valid document that expresses Mrs. Whitmore's final wishes. I felt like I was going to be sick. She lied to me, I said. She called me to the hospital, told me she was sorry, told me she loved me, told me she was leaving me everything. And it was all a lie. Isabel, Jennifer said gently, I don't think. No. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. She did this on purpose. She knew she was dying, and she wanted one last chance to manipulate me. To make me think I was forgiven, to make me watch her die thinking we'd reconciled, and then to make sure I got nothing. This was her final way of punishing me. Jennifer didn't deny it. Marcus and I walked out of that office in stunned silence. We got in the car and just sat there for a while, neither of us knowing what to say. I can't believe she did this, I finally said. I actually thought she'd changed. I thought she'd finally loved me. Maybe she did, Marcus said quietly. Maybe she wanted to change the will but didn't have time. No. I shook my head. You didn't know her like I did. This was intentional. This was calculated. She had 3 days between updating that will and having the stroke. 3 days when she could have called Jennifer and changed it if she'd really wanted to. But she didn't. Because this was always the plan. I started laughing, a bitter sound that scared even me. She won, I said. Even from the grave, she won. She got to die thinking I'd forgiven her, thinking we'd reconciled, thinking she'd made peace. And I get to live with the knowledge that it was all fake. That she never actually loved me. That her last act on earth was to make sure I knew exactly how little I mattered to her. Marcus pulled me into a hug, and I finally broke down completely. The next few weeks were a blur. The estate went into probate. The Whitmore Foundation was established. Rosa got her $1.5 million, and I was genuinely happy for her. She'd earned it, and she'd been more of a family to me than Catherine ever was. I tried to contest the will, of course. I found my own lawyer, explaining what Catherine had told me in the hospital. But the will was airtight. It had been properly executed with witnesses. There was no evidence of diminished capacity. And oral promises to change a will aren't legally enforceable. The case was dismissed. I returned to my life, to my job, to my tiny apartment in Sunnyvale. Marcus and I tried to move forward. But something had broken inside me. The wound from my childhood, that desperate need for Catherine's love that I thought I'd healed, had been ripped open again. I started having nightmares about my grandmother, about that conversation in the hospital, about her saying she loved me with that same cold calculation she'd used for everything else in her life. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus at work. Marcus suggested therapy, and I went, but it didn't help. How do you process being manipulated by someone even as they're dying? How do you grieve for someone who used their last breath to hurt you one final time? Then, 3 months after Catherine's funeral, Rosa called me. "Isabel," she said, her voice shaking, "I need to see you. There's something I need to tell you. Something about Mrs. Whitmore." We met at a coffee shop in San Jose. Rosa looked older than I remembered, the stress of the past months visible on her face. "I've been struggling with this," she said. "I didn't know if I should tell you. But I can't keep it inside anymore. It's not right." "What are you talking about?" Rosa reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age. "Mrs. Whitmore gave this to me 20 years ago," she said. "She told me to keep it safe, and to never tell anyone about it. But after everything that's happened, I think you need to see it." I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a letter, written in Catherine's precise handwriting. It was dated May 15, 2004. I would have been 6 years old. I started reading. "My dear Elizabeth," it began. "My mother's name. If you're reading this, then I have failed in my duty to protect you, and you've discovered the truth about your birth. I'm writing this now, while you're still alive, in case that day ever comes. You are not my biological daughter. Your father Thomas and I were unable to have children. In 1967, we adopted you from a young woman named Patricia Lynn, who was Chinese and unmarried and desperate. We paid her $5,000 and promised her we would give you a good life. We never told you because we wanted you to be a Whitmore in every sense of the word. We wanted you to have all the advantages our name could provide. And in that racist era, having a Chinese daughter would have been complicated. But you are my daughter in every way that matters. I have loved you as fiercely as any mother could love her child. You are a Whitmore, regardless of biology. I'm writing this because I fear you may somehow discover the truth, and I want you to hear it from me. You were chosen. You were wanted. You were loved. Forever yours, Mother." I read the letter 3 times, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. "My mother was adopted?" I said. "My mother was Chinese?" Rosa nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Mrs. Whitmore made me promise never to tell. She said it was family business, private business. But Isabel, this means you're 1/4 Chinese. This means when Mrs. Whitmore disowned you for marrying Marcus, when she said all those terrible things about his family being immigrants. She was a hypocrite. She was a liar. I felt like the world was spinning. Does anyone else know about this?" "No. Mr. Thomas died without ever telling anyone. Mrs. Whitmore kept it secret her whole life. Even your mother never knew. She died thinking she was a Whitmore by blood." I stared at the letter in my hands. Catherine had spent my entire childhood emphasizing family legacy, family blood, family duty. She disowned me for marrying someone Chinese. She'd called Marcus an immigrant's son with such contempt. And the entire time, her own daughter, my mother, had been adopted from a Chinese woman. The hypocrisy was staggering. But more than that, it revealed something even darker about Catherine's final manipulation. "Rosa," I said slowly, "Catherine knew. When she disowned me for marrying Marcus, she knew she was being a hypocrite. She knew my mother was Chinese. She knew I had Chinese heritage." "Yes," Rosa whispered. "And she still did it. She still gave me that ultimatum. She still chose racism and prejudice over her own granddaughter." Rosa nodded miserably. A strange calm came over me. For the first time since Catherine's death, I felt clear-headed. "Thank you for showing me this," I said. "I know it wasn't easy. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to finish what Catherine started," I said. "I'm going to tell the truth." Over the next 2 weeks, I did my research. I found Patricia Lynn, or rather, I found her grave. She'd died in 1989, long before I was born. But I found her family. I found cousins, second cousins, people who remembered her. And I confirmed the story. Patricia had indeed given up a baby girl for adoption in 1967 to a wealthy white couple in Hillsborough. She'd done it because she had no other choice, because being an unmarried Chinese mother in 1967 America meant poverty and shame and no options. I collected documents. I got a DNA test that confirmed Chinese ancestry. I found adoption records through a private investigator that cost me 3 months' salary. Then I called the San Francisco Chronicle. The story ran on November 3, 2024, with the headline, Bay Area Socialite's Hidden Heritage, Catherine Whitmore's Racist Legacy Exposed. The article detailed everything. Catherine's adoption of my mother. The secret she'd kept for decades. Her disowning me for marrying someone Chinese despite her own daughter being Chinese. The hypocrisy, the lies, the manipulation. It quoted me extensively. My grandmother spent her entire life building an image of herself as the keeper of family legacy and tradition. She disowned me for choosing love over racism. And the entire time, she was hiding the fact that my mother was Chinese. She was hiding the fact that I am part Chinese. She made me feel ashamed of the man I loved, made me feel like I was betraying my family, when she was the one who'd betrayed everything she claimed to believe in. The story went viral. Suddenly, everyone was talking about Catherine Whitmore. The charities she'd supported started questioning whether they wanted to be associated with her name. The Whitmore Foundation, barely 3 months old, was facing calls to change its name entirely. Society figures who'd attended her funeral were now distancing themselves from her memory. The Mercury News ran an op-ed titled The Poison of Respectability, How Catherine Whitmore Represents Silicon Valley's Racist Past. And Jennifer Huang called me. We need to talk, she said. We met at her office again, that same conference room overlooking San Francisco. You've created quite a storm, Jennifer said. I told the truth. That's all. The foundation is in crisis. Half the board wants to resign. Major donors are pulling out. The Whitmore name has become toxic. Good, I said coldly. Jennifer studied me for a long moment. You're angrier than I thought you'd be. My grandmother manipulated me until the day she died. She lied to me about forgiving me so she could feel good about herself in her final weeks. She made sure I got nothing while leaving money to her lawyer. Yeah, I'm angry. I understand, Jennifer said quietly. And I want you to know something. Something I probably shouldn't tell you. I waited 3 days before her stroke, when Catherine updated her will to exclude you. I advised against it. I told her it was cruel. I told her she should reconsider. She told me it was none of my business, that this was about teaching you a lesson about family loyalty. A lesson, I repeated bitterly. But then, after her stroke, when she asked to see you, I thought maybe she really had changed. I thought maybe she was going to call me and change the will. I waited for that call. It never came. Because she never intended to change it. I don't know, Jennifer said. Maybe she didn't have time. Maybe she was too weak. Or maybe you're right. Maybe it was all part of her plan. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a check. This is my $500,000 inheritance, she said, sliding it across the table. I don't want it. Catherine hired me because I was good at my job, not because we were friends. This money feels wrong to me. I'd like you to have it. I stared at the check in shock. I can't take this. Yes, you can. Consider it a small act of justice. It's not the $40 million you should have inherited, but it's something. Jennifer. Please, she said. Let me do this. Let me feel like I helped fix a small part of the damage Catherine caused. I took the check with shaking hands. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Over the next few months, I watched Catherine's legacy crumble. The Whitmore Foundation struggled to maintain relevance with a toxic name. The estate in Hillsborough sat empty, because no one wanted to buy the home of such a controversial figure. And I realized something. Catherine had wanted to control her legacy even in death. She'd wanted to be remembered as a pillar of society, a generous philanthropist, a woman of refinement and class. But I had taken that away from her. By exposing her secret, by revealing her hypocrisy, I'd ensured that Catherine Whitmore would be remembered not for her charity or her status, but for her racism, her cruelty, and her lies. She'd won in life. She'd gotten everything she wanted, the money, the status, the power to hurt me one last time. But I won in death. Marcus and I used Jennifer's $500,000 as a down payment on a house in Fremont. Nothing like Catherine's mansion, but it was ours. We painted the walls bright colors. We hosted dinner parties with Marcus's family. We adopted another cat. Rosa came to visit often. With her inheritance, she'd bought a small house in San Carlos and brought her children from Guatemala to live with her. We became close, and she told me stories about my mother I'd never heard before. Including one story that changed everything. We were having tea in my kitchen when Rosa said, "I have something else I need to tell you." About the letter. What about it? It wasn't the only letter Mrs. Whitmore wrote. There was another one. Addressed to you. My blood ran cold. What? She gave it to me the day before she updated her will. June 14, 2024. She said it was to give it to you 1 year after her death. She said you'd need that time to process everything. Where is it? Rosa reached into her purse and pulled out another envelope. I know it hasn't been a year yet, she said. But after everything that's happened, I think you should have it now. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The letter was dated June 14, 2024. The day before Catherine updated her will for the last time. My dearest Isabel, it began. By the time you read this, I will be gone, and you will be angry with me. You will have discovered that I left you nothing. You will have learned about my final manipulation, calling you to the hospital to make you think I'd forgiven you. You will hate me. And you'll be right too. I want you to know that I plan all of this. Every bit of it. The cruel will. The hospital confession. The promise of inheritance that would never come. I did it because I needed you to be free. You spent your entire childhood desperate for my love, desperate for my approval. Even when you married Marcus and I disowned you, part of you was still that little girl hoping her grandmother would finally say she was proud of her. As long as you needed my approval, you would never truly be free. You would never fully embrace the life you'd chosen. So I took away any possibility of reconciliation. I made sure that even in death, I would hurt you one more time. I made sure you could never remember me fondly, never tell yourself comforting lies about how we made peace at the end. I wanted you to hate me completely. Because hating me would finally set you free. The truth about your mother being adopted, about being Chinese, that was real. I was a hypocrite and a racist, and I deserve every bit of criticism you've given me in the press. I'm glad you exposed me. You should be proud of that courage. But the money was always meant to be a test. If you fight for the inheritance, if you spend years in court battles trying to get what you think is rightfully yours, then I've failed. Then you're still trapped in the Whitmore family's web, still defining yourself by my standards and my legacy. But if you walk away, if you build your own life with your own money and your own choices, then you've truly escaped. Then you've become the woman I always knew you could be but was too proud and too damaged to help you become. I never learned how to love properly, Isabel. My parents were cold, my husband was distant, and I passed that coldness on to your mother and to you. It's the Whitmore curse, we build empires but destroy relationships. You broke that curse by choosing Marcus. By choosing love over money. By choosing warmth over status. I couldn't tell you I was proud of you while I was alive. It would have made you doubt your choices, made you wonder if you were doing what I wanted instead of what you wanted. But I'm telling you now, in death, when it can't matter anymore. I was wrong about everything. You were right. And I am so proud of you. Use that pride however you need to. Let it comfort you or enrage you or confuse you. Let it be fuel for your hatred or a foundation for forgiveness. But know that my final wish is for you to forget about me and the Whitmore name and all of this poison legacy. Build your own family. Love your husband. Be happy in your small house with your regular job. That happiness is the only inheritance that matters. With love I never knew how to give, Catherine. I read the letter 5 times. Then I put it down and started laughing. Even in her confession, even in her attempt at redemption, Catherine was trying to control the narrative. Trying to frame her cruelty as some kind of tough love, as a necessary step in my liberation. Maybe she believed that. Maybe she really thought hurting me one last time was the gift I needed. Or maybe she was just a bitter, racist old woman who couldn't admit that she'd wasted her entire life prioritizing wealth over human connection. I'll never know for sure. But here's what I do know. I took Marcus to Hawaii for our 4th anniversary, using some of Jennifer's money. We stayed in a modest hotel, ate plate lunches from food trucks, and watched the sunset from a public beach. And I was happy. Truly, deeply happy in a way I'd never been in Catherine's mansion. Rosa's grandchildren call me Tia Isabel, and I teach them to make tamales every December. I got promoted to director at my firm. Marcus's company went public, and his stock options are worth enough that we can stop worrying about money. We're planning to start trying for a baby next year. And I haven't thought about the Whitmore estate or the $40 million or any of it in months. Because Catherine was right about one thing, even if she was right for the wrong reasons. The best revenge isn't getting the money. The best revenge is not needing it. The best revenge is building a life so full of love and joy and real human connection that all of her wealth and status and legacy seem empty and meaningless by comparison. Catherine Whitmore spent 86 years building an empire and died alone in a hospital room, having pushed away everyone who might have loved her. I'm 26 years old, living in a house I can barely afford, with a husband who makes me laugh every day and friends who don't care about my last name. And I won. Not because I destroyed her legacy, though I did. Not because I exposed her secrets, though I did that too. But because I chose love. And I chose it again every day after, even when it would have been easier to be bitter and angry and consumed by what I'd lost. Sometimes I still wake up angry. Sometimes I still imagine what I could have done with $40 million. Sometimes I wonder if Catherine's final letter was genuine or just one more manipulation from beyond the grave. But then Marcus makes me coffee exactly how I like it, and Rosa texts me a photo of her garden, and I remember that I have everything I actually need. The inheritance I wanted was money and status and my grandmother's love. The inheritance I got was freedom. And that's worth more than $40 million. That's worth everything. 3 months after reading Catherine's letter, I was sitting in my living room when I got a call from a name I didn't recognize. Gerald Whitmore. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. Isabel Morrison? The voice was male, elderly, with a slight Boston accent. Yes, who is this? My name is Gerald Whitmore. I'm your grandfather's younger brother. Catherine's brother-in-law. We've never met. I sat up straighter. I'd heard of Gerald exactly once, years ago. Catherine had mentioned him with disdain, saying he'd run off to Massachusetts and abandoned the family business decades ago. I'm calling because I read the articles about Catherine, Gerald continued. About what she did to you. And I thought you deserved to know the full story. The one Catherine spent her whole life hiding. What story? Can we meet? I'm actually in California right now. I flew out specifically to talk to you. I'm staying at a hotel in Palo Alto. Something in his voice made me agree. We met the next day at a restaurant near Stanford. Gerald Whitmore was 82 years old, thin and tall with white hair and kind eyes that looked nothing like Catherine's cold stare. He stood when I approached and shook my hand warmly. Thank you for meeting me, he said. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not sure why I did, I admitted. We ordered coffee, and Gerald spent a long moment just looking at me. You look like Thomas, he said finally. Your grandfather. You have his eyes. Catherine must have seen it every time she looked at you. I thought I looked like my mother. You do. But Elizabeth looked like Thomas too. That's what made the whole thing so ironic. What whole thing? Gerald took a deep breath. Catherine didn't adopt your mother because she and Thomas couldn't have children. That was a lie. They adopted your mother because Thomas already had a child with a Chinese woman, and Catherine found out. The coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. What? In 1966, Thomas had an affair with a woman named Patricia Lynn. She worked as a secretary at his real estate office in San Francisco. She got pregnant. Thomas wanted to do the right thing, he wanted to leave Catherine and marry Patricia. He was in love with her. I couldn't breathe. But Catherine found out. And she made him an offer, stay married to me, give up Patricia, and we'll adopt the baby. That way Thomas could still be a father to his biological child, and the family reputation would remain intact. The alternative was a scandalous divorce, public humiliation, and Catherine would make sure Thomas lost everything in the settlement. Her father's lawyers would destroy him. So my mother. I couldn't finish the sentence. Elizabeth wasn't adopted from some desperate young woman. She was Thomas's biological daughter. Your mother was Thomas and Patricia's child. Which means you're not 1/4 Chinese. You're half Chinese. The restaurant seemed to tilt around me. Catherine knew this the entire time? Oh, she knew. She forced Thomas to pay Patricia to sign away her parental rights. She forced him to never see Patricia again. And she raised Elizabeth as her own, but she never let Thomas forget that his daughter only existed in his life because of Catherine's generosity. She held it over him for the rest of his life. How do you know all this? Thomas told me. He was my brother, and he was miserable. He confessed everything to me in 1985, about 10 years before he died. He said living with Catherine was like living with a jailer. She controlled everything, his money, his business, his relationship with his own daughter. He couldn't even tell Elizabeth the truth because Catherine threatened to cut them both off completely if he did. Gerald pulled out a photograph from his wallet and slid it across the table. It was a picture of a young Thomas Whitmore with a beautiful Chinese woman. They were smiling at each other, and the love between them was obvious even in a decades-old photograph. That's Patricia, Gerald said. Thomas kept this photo hidden in his desk at work for 30 years. It was the only piece of her he was allowed to keep. I stared at the photo, at this woman who was my biological grandmother, and felt tears burning my eyes. Did Patricia know about my mother? About Elizabeth growing up with the Whitmores? Yes. Thomas found ways to send her photos occasionally, updates about how Elizabeth was doing. Patricia never married, never had other children. She spent her whole life grieving the daughter she'd been forced to give up. And Catherine knew Thomas was doing this? If she did, she never said anything. I think by that point, she'd broken Thomas so thoroughly that letting him send a few photos didn't seem like a threat anymore. He was never going to leave her. She'd won. I thought about my grandfather, the man I'd barely known before he died when I was 8 years old. I remembered him as quiet, withdrawn, someone who always seemed sad. I thought it was just his personality. Now I understood. He'd spent his entire adult life forced to live with a woman who held his daughter hostage, who'd forced him to abandon the woman he loved, who controlled every aspect of his existence. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Gerald leaned back in his chair. "Because Catherine is dead, and the truth doesn't have to die with her. Because you deserve to know that your heritage isn't something shameful that needed to be hidden. Your grandmother Patricia was a brilliant, kind woman who was destroyed by racism and Catherine's cruelty. You should know where you came from. Is Patricia's family still alive?" "Yes. She had 2 sisters who are still living. They're in their 70s now, living in San Francisco's Sunset District. They never knew about Elizabeth or about you. Patricia kept that secret to protect everyone involved. But they deserve to know they have family." He slid a piece of paper across the table with names and phone numbers. "Patricia's sisters are named Helen and Grace Lynn. If you want to meet them, I can help arrange it." I looked at the paper, then back at Gerald. "Why are you doing this? You barely knew me. You haven't been part of the family for decades." "Because Thomas was my brother, and I loved him. And because I watched Catherine destroy him slowly, year by year, until there was nothing left but a shell of the man he used to be. She took his daughter, his love, his dignity, everything. The least I can do is make sure his granddaughter knows the truth." Gerald reached across the table and took my hand. "You're not just Catherine Whitmore's granddaughter. You're Thomas Whitmore's granddaughter. You're Patricia Lynn's granddaughter. You come from love, Isabel. Real love, the kind that sacrifices everything. That's your inheritance." I met Helen and Grace Lynn 2 weeks later, in a small house in San Francisco's Sunset District that smelled like jasmine tea and incense. They were both small, elegant women with gray hair and sharp eyes. When they opened the door and saw me standing there, Helen gasped and put her hand to her mouth. "You look just like her," she whispered. "Just like Patricia." We sat in their living room, and I told them everything. About my mother Elizabeth, who they'd never known existed. About Catherine's cruelty. About discovering the truth. Grace cried quietly throughout the whole story. Helen held my hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Patricia never told us," Helen said. "She never said a word. She just came home one day after giving birth, and she was broken. She wouldn't talk about what happened. We thought maybe the father had died, or maybe he'd abandoned her. We never knew she'd been forced to give up the baby. She talked about a baby sometimes," Grace added. "When she was very old, near the end. She had dementia, and sometimes she'd ask where her baby was. We thought it was just confusion. We didn't know." They showed me photos of Patricia. Pictures from her childhood, from her time working in San Francisco, from her later years. In every photo, there was a sadness in her eyes that I now understood. "She died in 1989, Helen said. Breast cancer. She was only 53 years old. She spent her whole life alone, grieving a daughter she'd been forced to give away." I looked at the photos of this woman, my biological grandmother, and felt a grief I hadn't expected. Grief for someone I'd never met, someone whose life had been destroyed by the same woman who'd tried to destroy mine. "I'm so sorry," I said. "I'm sorry Patricia went through that. I'm sorry you lost her so young. I'm sorry that my mother never got to know her real mother." "It's not your fault," Helen said gently. "It's that woman's fault. Catherine Whitmore. She took our sister from us, took her baby, and left her with nothing but pain. I exposed her," I said. "After she died, I told everyone the truth about what she did. I destroyed her reputation." Grace smiled, and it was fierce. "Good. She deserved it." They invited me to come back whenever I wanted. They showed me more photos, told me stories about Patricia, taught me a few words in Cantonese that Patricia had taught them from their mother. They asked about Marcus, about my life, about my plans for the future. And for the first time, I felt like I was connecting with family who actually wanted to know me, not what I could do for them or how I reflected on their legacy. When I left their house that evening, Helen pressed something into my hand. It was a jade bracelet, simple and beautiful. "This was Patricia's," she said. "Our mother gave it to her when she turned 18. She wore it every day until everything happened. She couldn't bear to wear it after giving up the baby. She gave it to me for safekeeping and said maybe someday it would matter again. I think she'd want you to have it." I put the bracelet on, and it felt like Patricia was wrapping her arms around me across time and death. When I got home, Marcus took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm more than okay," I said. "I found family. Real family." I told him everything Gerald had revealed, everything I learned from Helen and Grace. And as I talked, I realized something profound. Catherine had spent her whole life trying to control the narrative, trying to bury secrets, trying to maintain an image of perfection and superiority. She'd forced Thomas to give up his true love. She'd raised his biological daughter as her adopted child while holding it over him forever. She disowned me for marrying someone Chinese while knowing full well that I was Chinese. Every cruel thing she'd done was rooted in racism, in a desperate need to maintain a false narrative of Whitmore's superiority and purity. But the truth had won anyway. The truth always wins eventually. "You know what the best part is?" I said to Marcus. "Catherine thought she was punishing me by leaving me nothing. She thought she was teaching me some kind of lesson about not needing the Whitmore legacy. And she accidentally gave me something so much better. By cutting me off, by forcing me to build my own life, she freed me to discover my real heritage. If she'd left me the 40 million, if she'd kept me trapped in that world of country clubs and charity galas and maintaining appearances, I never would have searched for the truth. I never would have found Helen and Grace. I never would have known about Patricia." Marcus smiled. "So in trying to hurt you one last time, she gave me the greatest gift of all. She gave me back half of my history. She gave me family who actually loves me." The next Sunday, I invited Helen and Grace to our house for dinner. Marcus's parents came too, and Rosa brought her grandchildren. We crowded around our small dining table, 3 generations and 2 cultures coming together. Grace taught everyone how to make dumplings. Marcus's mother, Li Wei, shared stories about immigrating to America. Rosa talked about her journey from Guatemala. The kids ran around the house making noise and chaos. And I sat there wearing Patricia's jade bracelet, in a house I'd bought with my own money, surrounded by people who loved me for who I actually was, and I felt richer than Catherine Whitmore had ever been. Because Catherine had died with $40 million and no one who truly mourned her. And I had everything that actually mattered. 2 months later, I got one final surprise. Jennifer Huang called me again. "You need to come to my office," she said. "Something's been discovered in Catherine's estate paperwork." I drove to San Francisco with a sense of déjà vu, wondering what other secrets Catherine had buried. Jennifer was waiting with a file folder. When we were going through Catherine's personal papers to close out the estate, we found a safety deposit box we didn't know existed. It was registered under her maiden name, Catherine Ashford, at a small bank in Burlingame. The bank recently contacted us because the box rental had lapsed. What was in it? Jennifer slid a document across the table. It was a life insurance policy, taken out in 1998, the year I was born. The beneficiary was listed as Isabel Morrison. The payout was $5 million. "I don't understand," I said. "Catherine took out this policy shortly after you came to live with her. It was separate from her will, separate from her estate planning. Just a simple life insurance policy with you as the direct beneficiary. Since it's not part of the estate, it wasn't subject to the will's provisions. It passed directly to you upon her death." I stared at the document, my mind reeling. "There's also this," Jennifer said, sliding over an envelope. Inside was a note, dated 1998, in Catherine's handwriting. "For Isabel's education, security, and future. Because even if I fail at everything else, I can at least do this. C.W." The note was written when I was an infant, when I'd just lost both parents, when Catherine had just taken on the burden of raising me. Before decades of coldness and cruelty. Before the ultimatum about Marcus. Before all the pain and manipulation. "She took this out when you were a baby," Jennifer said quietly. "And she never told anyone about it. She kept paying the premiums every year for 26 years. Even after disowning you. Even when she was dying. She never cancelled it. I didn't know what to feel. Anger that she'd hidden this, that she could have told me about it and didn't? Gratitude that somewhere, buried beneath all the cruelty, there was this one small act of care? Confusion about whether this changed anything, whether it made her less of a monster or just more complicated? What do you think it means? I asked Jennifer. I think, she said carefully, that Catherine Whitmore was a deeply damaged woman who didn't know how to love openly but found one way to show she cared. Whether that's enough to forgive everything else she did. That's not for me to say. I took the policy paperwork and left her office in a daze. That night, Marcus and I sat on our back porch, looking at the stars. $5 million, he said. That changes things. Does it though? I asked. I mean, yes, it's money. It's security. But does it change what Catherine did? Does it make her less cruel? Maybe she was both, Marcus said. Maybe she was cruel and caring, racist and loving, manipulative and protective. Maybe people are complicated. I don't want her to be complicated, I admitted. I want her to be a villain so I can feel good about hating her. But she's not, Marcus said gently. She's just human. Deeply flawed, often terrible, but human. We sat in silence for a while. You know what I want to do with the money? I said finally. What? I want to set up a scholarship fund. For Chinese American students, first-generation college students, kids from immigrant families. The kind of students Catherine would have sneered at. The kind of students like you. Marcus took my hand. She'd hate that. I know, I said. That's the point. I'm going to use her money to do the exact opposite of everything she believed in. And I'm going to name it after Patricia Lynn. And that's exactly what I did. The Patricia Lynn Memorial Scholarship was established in January 2025, funded by Catherine Whitmore's life insurance policy. It provides full-ride scholarships to 5 students per year who are first-generation college students from immigrant families. The first recipient was a girl from Oakland whose parents ran a small Vietnamese restaurant. She's studying computer science at Stanford. She reminds me of Marcus. She reminds me that Catherine was wrong about everything that mattered. And every time I meet a scholarship recipient, every time I see their gratitude and their parents' pride in their determination to succeed, I think about Patricia Lynn, who never got to see her daughter grow up but whose name now helps other people's daughters achieve their dreams. I think about Thomas Whitmore, who loved the wrong woman according to society but loved her truly and deeply anyway. I think about my mother Elizabeth, who died never knowing her real heritage but who loved me in the brief time we had together. And yes, I even think about Catherine. Complicated, cruel, damaged Catherine, who hurt me terribly but also, in her own broken way, tried to protect me. I still don't forgive her. But I understand her a little better now. And that's enough.